Hi everyone, welcome to highlights and analysis of the men's race in Ironman Chattanooga. There were 5 names that very much stood out on the start list, Sam Long doubling up after a second at the 70.3 World Champs last weekend, along with Joe Skipper, Lionel Sanders, Ben Hoffman and Cody Beals. The race would offer $15,000 for the winner and also 2 World Championship slots for the October 2022 race in Kona. If you haven't heard the news, there's going to be 2 Ironman World Championships next year, one in May in St George and then the usual Kona race in October, which I personally think is really weird as whoever wins St George is going to be world champ for 4 whole months. The swim would be non-wetsuit, but it would also be a point-to-point swim in a river in the direction of the current, which would give the trio of Skipper, Long and Sanders a good shot of minimising time lost in the swim. Hoffman led the whole swim out with Beals and Thiago Vinal on his feet, coming into T1 together. Hoffman would spend the entire run to the transition tent faffing about with his tri-suit and would lose 25 seconds to Beals. I find it really odd that we still see athletes doing this. We saw Long and Appleton have tri-suit malfunctions last week in St George as a result of not wearing the upper half of their suit in the swim. I know 25 seconds is nothing in an Ironman, but I'd rather not lose it if I didn't have to. Long, Skipper and Sanders had strong swims, evidently benefiting from the current, coming out of the water only 90 seconds down. Cody Beals has a reputation of being a very smart racer, so he'd likely be expecting to see the big bikers up with him soon, so I don't think he pushes on too hard on the early stages of the bike, evidenced by Hoffman recovering those lost 25 seconds very quickly. In fact, after only 20 minutes of cycling, Skipper and Long show their faces at the front of the bike, and it's really at this point that the race begins. Interestingly, when the camera pans around, there's no Lionel Sanders with them. At this point, it's only these 4. Sanders has definitely appeared to be more accepting of late that he has to race his own race in Ironmans rather than trying to stick with others at any cost, but I think he would have only let Long and Skipper away from him if he really couldn't go with the pace. When we do get a shot of Sanders, there's nothing to suggest anything is particularly wrong. He's leading a few athletes behind him in a pace line. We'll have to wait for the Sanders debrief. He's very open, so I'm sure we'll get an answer, but I think this is just him sticking to his power numbers. About 50k into the bike, Skipper takes a wrong turning and loses 30 seconds or so. Word from his coaching team suggests Skipper is in fact still learning his lefts and rights. At the first time check, Sanders is 3 minutes 20 down on the leading 4, who do eventually come back together. We can see Skipper here getting stuck behind some cars. I was very surprised to see cars on the course. In my opinion, when you've got people racing for their livelihood, you can't be having cars on the course going in the same direction as the athletes, potentially affecting the race, but also for safety reasons. Skipper and Long gap the others over the next 30k and come through the 90k time check 50 seconds ahead of Beals and 1 minute 50 ahead of Hoffman. At this point, the gap to Sanders has grown too, who's currently almost 6 minutes down on the leading duo. This trend continues for the next 40k. Skipper and Long work together pretty consistently, continuing to grow their lead up to 130k in, where they have 3 minutes 30 over Beals in third. Hoffman continues to slip. At this point he's 5:30 back, and at current trajectory will soon be surpassed by Sanders, who is still losing time on Skipper and Long, but at a much slower rate. Sanders has distanced the group he was with earlier, and is gaining time on Hoffman and Beals at 6 minutes 30 back. At the next time check, towards the end of the bike, Lionel has actually passed Beals and Hoffman, holding his gap to Long and Skipper. It may have taken 100 miles, but it looks like Sanders has finally accelerated up to his full speed. Skipper's gears stop working towards the end of the bike, and he's stuck in his biggest cogs for the last 10 miles. It's not an issue for Skipper, who actually finds a 30-second gap on Long coming into T2. Long didn't appear to have a mechanical, and Skipper didn't appear to noticeably push on, so I think it was just a case of Long potentially starting to feel the 70.3 world champs in his legs a bit. Skipper takes a slight lead on Long onto the marathon. Sanders comes in 6:30 down in third, Beals in fourth, 7:45 down, and Hoffman 9:10 down. All still in striking range to take the win if they run well. Initially, Skipper looks a lot lighter on his feet than Long does, and over the first 10k we see Skipper grow his lead. Long is holding fairly steady in the region of a minute down, and he does not look bad at all. Behind, Sanders, Beals and Hoffman are all coming together 8 to 9 minutes back. From here, the order is all over the place for the rest of the race. We see Long starting to suffer around 16k in, having to walk on some of the uphill sections. He's still in second, but has lost more time to Skipper, whilst Beals has pulled 30 seconds ahead of Sanders and Hoffman. Long is reduced to a run-walk strategy at this point, and Beals, who is still looking strong, makes a pass around the half-marathon mark. Sam Long would end up DNFing not long after. He was losing well over a minute a kilometre, so I think he would have been fighting for a 5th place at best. Skipper is still looking fresh, his pace hasn't noticeably dropped yet, and despite Beals looking good, he still has a comfortable 9 minutes on him. Beals isn't in the clear yet though. Sanders and Hoffman are only 30 seconds back or so and haven't been broken yet. Sanders is stuck on Hoffman's shoulder as these two actually bridge up to Beals surprisingly quickly after having been dropped by him not too long ago. These three all sit together for 10 minutes, but Sanders starts to up the pace first and Hoffman sticks with him, leaving Beals in fourth. Around the 30k mark, Sanders is just starting to pull ahead of Hoffman, just testing the waters to see how much Hoffman has left in the tank. Beals has fallen off the pace. He couldn't go with Sanders and Hoffman to challenge for the podium, so was left in no man's land comfortably in fourth place, which would be where he'd finally end up. Sanders finally breaks Hoffman from 31 to 33k, and that's that for our final positions for the day. Skipper wins in 7:45 minus a little detour on the bike, Sanders in second, Hoffman in third and Beals in fourth. I believe Skipper has already qualified for Kona 2022, so the 2 slots would go to Sanders and Hoffman. It'll be interesting to hear Lionel's take on the race. He clearly measured his effort very well and raced pretty independently of the race dynamics going on around him. He held his gap to Long and Skipper well in the final third of the bike and didn't lose an awful lot of time to Skipper on the run, so I do wonder how the race would have shaped up had Lionel gone with Long and Skipper at the start of the bike. That's a hypothetical scenario though that we won't get an answer to, and I do think Sanders is trying to actively learn how his performances depend on his decisions, pacing, nutrition, etc. A very strong race by Skipper though, who looked in control of the race and his own performance throughout. As always, thank you very much for watching.